An important statement about government was recently made. It reads, "The task of government is to serve the public. It has been my deep and continuous concern to assure that each American receives from his government the fastest, most efficient, and courteous service." The President of the United States. This film is addressed to the people in government whose work involves them in serving the public, face-to-face, by letter, and particularly by telephone.
To the people in government whose work involves them in serving the public, particularly by telephone. Well, what the narrator said, that means us, all right. Mrs. Doris Logan. Miss Gail Swanson. And me, Ed Keller. Because we work in the government and use the telephone a good many times a day. The way we serve the public is important to our agency and to the government. And it's also important to us personally, as individuals. Now that isn't as obvious. And why is this true? Well, let's look at an old question. Just, what is the government? Is government the flags and the monuments, the beautiful column buildings? No, they're the symbols of government. Well, is government the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the body of law under which our people live together? No, those are the tools of government. Or is government the officials, the president and cabinet officers, the legislators, the commissioners, the governors and mayors and policemen? No, they're the servants of government. The government, our American kind of government, is of the people, by the people. By, that includes us, the people who work in government, and for the people. All the people of this wonderful country. For the people, the citizens. Now, what is government to them? Important, complex, true. But in essence, government to them is what they think of it, the sum of their impressions, the impressions they get from you and me as they deal with us. These impressions are usually quite simple.
I think they're just fine people, really fine people, and most helpful.
Impressions, impressions, impressions. Unfair? Think back to your own experiences. Has this ever happened to you?
Department store where I'd always been treated well. Of course, it's easy to forget that. And this time, when I tried to return something, I lost the sales slip, but the label shows you I got it here.
But the label doesn't show you bought it here. Now, look, I've got my rules and regulations. No sales slip, no exchange. Now, what do you expect me to do? Cry about it?
And today, all these years later, when anyone mentions that store...
Look out for yourself down there. Those stores are full of stupid clerks looking for a chance to give you a hard time.
In government, as in business, one little incident can start a whole chain of impressions.
It was closing time, but our controller was leaving town early the next morning and needed a set of adjustment forms to work on while he was away, if we were to avoid a default.
See where you've got a problem. Tell you what, if you want to send somebody down for the blanks, I'll stay around till he gets here, okay?
Yes, and I certainly appreciate it, too. So thank you very much.
I'll say, now to pass along that good impression to his secretary.
Tell Harry to hurry over to the Wyman Bafter office. A man on Mr. Casey's going to keep the place open until we pick up the forms.
All right, I'll take care of it right away.
And from the secretary to her friend.
What a break. He didn't have to do it. He just went out of his way to be helpful.
And that's only the beginning. It's good that happened to the man who needed the help. It's also good for the government in general. And it's good for you and me.
You're wrong about government people, Lon. Helen was telling me just today how this nice man stayed late so her boss could
You know, Jack, there sure are a lot of helpful guys in the government offices. Grace was telling me last night about a fellow in one of the offices who went to some real inconvenience to help somebody out. Didn't have to do it. He stayed.
Unfortunately, all the chains of impressions aren't that favorable.
Oh, my gosh, I left that poor man on hold when Francis called, and I forgot all about him, and he sounded so urgent. Hello? Hello, sir? Oh, my, he's gone. Wonder what he's thinking.
Every contact each one of us has with a citizen, a customer, makes an impression on that customer, either bad or good. There is seldom any in between.
To the people on our street, in our church, to the parents of our children's friends, to them, we are the government. The fact is, we government people are all members of one team, a worldwide team, whose purpose is to serve the American public. So we're entitled to feel pretty sore when some member of the team creates a wrong impression. I don't want my neighbor to think that I'm no good at my job just because he's been treated badly at some government office.
So, what can we do about it? Well, what kinds of people are there in government? First is the great majority of us. The able, intelligent men and women who know their jobs, take pride in being competent professionals, and who constantly go out of their way to give every individual the kind of patient and considerate service to which he is entitled, and which will start another chain of good impressions. Then, as in any organization, there is another group. Remember that department store complaint clerk?
Lady, I keep telling you, I've got my regulations. No sales slip, no exchange. What do you expect me to do? Cry about it?
By the way, that reminds me. Gail, how are we doing with Doris?
Well, she's improving, Mr. Keller. Remember how she used to be? That's not my department. But we've been working on her, and now? It's not my department, sir.
That's our Doris. And here's where we can do something. These are the government people who mean well and who would do better with their contacts with the public if they thought about it and knew how to act like a professional. But sometimes they don't think about it. So, we can help them think about it. And even if only by example, show them how. The most important thing to convince them of is that every contact a citizen has with government people is important, whether it's face-to-face, written communications, or the telephone. And these are increasing every day. Serving the public over the telephone carries some special problems. Often the telephone ring is just one more added pressure. And of course, the callers can't know how busy we may be.
I haven't been able to get at your permit listings, Mr. Kelsey, but perhaps... Excuse me. Permit division is Jensen. Yes, Mr. Cavaggio. Would you look in the upper right-hand corner and tell me the file number? Would you excuse me just a moment? I have a call on another line. Permit division, Miss Jensen. Oh, yes, sir. You'll find those complete records on file in, room 471, our building. That's right. You're welcome, sir. Goodbye. I'm sorry to have held you up, Mr. Cavaggio. Do you have that file number?
Miss Jansen, please, I need those listings.
Lots of our calls come from people who know what they want and how to ask for it. But many will be from people who need our help but know very little about government. People who are harder to serve. This is inevitable. With the medical assistance programs, broadening Social Security and veterans benefits, small business and farm loans, new civil rights protections, economic opportunity programs, and so on. So that when we start to go nuts, we must realize that many of our new customers are... Well, let's look at some of our customers. Some of the callers will be elderly, not as quick or concise as they used to be.
Would it be asking too much to ask you to tell me that again, please, sir?
Perhaps ill or with impairments or handicaps.
Still can't hear you. Oh, wait a minute, let's turn this up.
Perhaps emotionally disturbed. And we have to remind ourselves that feeling will often outweigh reason.
Give me that
you, Crumb. Just tell me where's the check. Where's the check?
Very often inarticulate, not too able to tell us what they mean.
Well, I'd like to, what I mean is, you know what I mean.
Sometimes from other countries, not easy to understand.
I need a passport. Who do I talk to? Hello?
And often not quick to understand procedures which are simple to us, but very complicated and strange to them.
What do you mean endorsement? So who knows endorsement? Just what do you want me to write on that paper?
But they're all customers, our customers, and they're entitled to the best possible service we can provide them. And here's the real core of the problem. To us, this call is just one of many routine items in a busy day. But to the person out there on the other end of the line, it's big. Even the citizen calling with a professional question has thought about this call in advance, prepared what he'll ask. And to that little old lady in her neighborhood phone booth, nervous and scared, hoping to find some help for her need. This is it. She's read up about us, asked her neighbors and the postman for advice. She's even written out what she'll say to us. Made a special trip to puzzle over the directory listings. And then it's taken her a while to muster up her courage to make the call. Remember, just about everybody is a little concerned about dealing with the government.
Because my husband, when he died, he had been working for 45 years, and I heard from a friend.
So, what are we going to say to her?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I wouldn't know about that. Try Rasma.
If only he could see her face. But Della has a sort of mental picture phone in the form of sympathy, understanding. She is a real professional and handles it this way.
I see, Mrs. Caslin. You do have a problem. Well, the only thing is, it's not the kind of problem I'm able to handle myself. But I'm sure I can find something out for you. I tell you what, if you'll give me your phone number or address, I'll try to have the right person get in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mrs. Caslin. It's been nice talking to you, too. Goodbye.
Well, what impression of government people is Mrs. Caslin going to spread around to her neighbors, her relatives, the grocer, anybody who will listen?
She was so nice to me. I feel so relieved.
Sure, but more important, one of us representing all of us in government has helped a citizen who needed it.
You know, not everybody gets paid for doing what can give more deep satisfaction than anything in the world. The satisfaction of being able to help people who need the help only we can give.
What's the secret of making the good impressions that help all of us on the government team? It's simply developing an inner attitude, a way of feeling, and then acting as we feel. This attitude comes from an honest desire to be helpful, to take that extra step. That step we don't have to take, but the one that really makes the difference. On the telephone, we can show this attitude in several ways. First,
Permit Division, Miss Jansen. Yes, Mr. Lathrop.
make the caller sense that we'll be interested in his problem, and do our best to listen.
Yes, Mr. Lathrop. How long ago did this occur?
Then listen. Even on the slowest ones, give them time to talk. Don't cut in until we really have to, and then in a helpful sort of way.
I see. Well, could you give me an approximate date? Was it in the fall, perhaps?
Help the caller with leading questions to form into words what he's got in mind. Even if the caller is critical or emotional or abusive, remember, it isn't you he's mad at.
I know, Mr. Lathrop. Illness is always upsetting. Do you suppose that check date could have been as early as March or April? Around Easter time, perhaps?
And be patient.
Oh, yes.
Patient and sensitive. Seem relaxed and unhurried as we tried this question and that, searching out what's the real problem and how we can help, or locate the person who can help. And make sure, before we hang up, that a mutual understanding has been reached.
That's the date? All right, I can go ahead with the papers. Now, let's both think for a second. Is there anything else we need to ask? We're all clear? That's fine.
Make sure that we know just what the caller needs and that he knows we know it. And all along the route, we help the caller maintain his dignity.
Oh, you've made it very clear, Mr. Lathrop, and thank you for your patience. Goodbye.
So that when he hangs up, the uncertainties he started with are replaced by his self-respecting feeling of, I handled that very well.
They're a good bunch of people down there.
Now, let's look at some of the more common bad telephone habits. You may have run across a few of them.
Now then, lunching at the desk. Well, if you have to. But bad practice number 1. Letting a telephone ring and ring without answering at hours when people know the office is open.
I mean, he pulled this once too often, and I told him straight out, if he...
Aren't you going to answer the phone?
It's lunch hour.
Oh, gee.
Well, it's not my line. All right.
Bad practice number 2. Talking to someone else after picking up the phone when the caller can probably hear.
Dictation time and go jump off the monument. Hello?
Number 3, the flat greeting. And who knows who you are from hello?
Who? I don't know if he's come back yet. Oh, yeah, his hat's here. Maybe he's down in the cafeteria or somewhere.
And Jean, please, couldn't you say he's out of the office for a few minutes?
Madam, if I don't know where he went, how do I know when he'll be back? Why don't you call him again in an hour or so? He might be back then.
You could take a message, you know.
His assistant. Oh, Benny's too busy to take any calls right now. What do you want to talk to them about?
What is it you want to talk to them about? Jean, please, why not? If you'll tell me what you need, perhaps I can help you.
Hold it, madam. Madam, please, that isn't even our department. Why don't you try ASPDAS? I told you, madam, ASPDAS. ASPDAS.
Ah, the good old alphabet soup.
Transfer you. I'll try, but don't blame me if you get cut off. Oh, operator, will you take this call? This lady doesn't know who she wants to talk to.
No, actually, the bad impression started on its way with Jean's first word. In fact, on the tone.
What's wrong with my tone?
Hello. Apathy is what's wrong. It says to the caller, well, go ahead if you must, but nothing you're going to say can possibly interest me. Ah, her boss. Let's see how she handles her outgoing calls.
Yes, Mr. Stalker. Okay. 555-3268. Like I said, if he thinks I'm going to stay around.
She hasn't kept that number in front of her.
Mr. Stalker, what was that number again? Thanks. And you wanted to talk to Mr. Yeah, I remember. Matson. Is Mr. Matson there? All right, Mason. Mr. Stalker returning his call. Stalker. Huh? Oh, account section.
Listen to this next, and how many times has it happened to us?
Hello, Mr. Stalker. Thanks for returning my call. Tell you what I want to talk to you about.
This is Mr. Stalker's secretary. I will get Mr. Stalker for you now.
That sound effect you hear is Mr. Mason.
Please, Mr. Matson, I'm calling him. I'm calling him.
What's the matter with you, Stalker? Pick up the phone. Oh, I remember. Having a girl in the office place a call is a big status symbol with some people. Funny thing, the guys who really have status don't seem to need the symbol.
Yeah. Who? Oh, sure. What can I do for you? Oh, yeah. Now I remember. I had the papers right here this morning.
Why didn't he have the papers ready and his thoughts organized before he placed the call? And will you look at where he's holding the transmitter?
Yeah, now, Mr. Massey... Huh?
And the man's right name.
Oh, that's right, Mason. Well, I'll tell you, Mason.
Ah, here it comes, the technogab, the organizational hash, the inside jargon. Poor Mason.
Well, it looks to us like you're in clear violation of 461A, since you bypassed the business procedures and went ahead without checking with OSTM, or at least the task group over there. Now, what we require, what you've got to do is,
Require, insist, got to. How about we feel the best thing for you to do, well, anyway, now to end the call with the necessary, thorough mutual understanding.
I tell you what, you come down here and fill out a 3273 with a 526 amendment to supplement the ongoing interagency proceedings. And we'll certify it with the 321A and run it up to subcommittee, right? Right.
Right? By the way, Stocker, with service like that, how are your prospects for promotion? And have you thought about how Mr. Mason feels about this? Suppose, however, we put Mr. Stocker and Jean through a quick and painless personal training course. This might be the result. First, Jean is ready for calls with her personal communications island, an always-ready grouping near her telephone of directories, both community and departmental, her personal list of frequently called numbers, whatever data she frequently refers to in handling calls, a list of common referrals, and a reminder list of key questions which she has found helpful in digging the facts out of difficult callers. Jean answers now on the first ring or two, you'll notice.
Mrs. Witter's office, Miss Fenner.
And with a nice upbeat tone of, I want to help you in her greeting.
Mrs. Witter is temporarily in another building. May I take a message, or would you like to call her right now?
Oh, the smart Mrs. Witter left word where she'd be. And Jean will give all the details at once without the caller having to drag them out of her one by one.
Fine. She can be reached at 555-3744. Ask for Mrs. Witter from the accounts section, and whoever answers will call her to the phone. Got that number all right? You're welcome. Goodbye. Yes, sir.
And now for Mr. Stocker, who may also be doing us proud.
Jim, will you call back George Mason? You know his number?
More and more important men are dialing their own outgoing calls. Saves them time and the work moves faster. Though sometimes there's good reason not to.
That's 555-3268. I'd dial him myself, but he's usually in a meeting.
He uses the few seconds wait to finish organizing his thoughts and papers for this call. And look how he and Jean handle this next.
Mr. Mason is coming on, Mr. Stocker.
Right, Jean, I've got it.
The caller stays ready to receive the call. And this time, Mason won't be embarrassed by saying, hello, old buddy, to old buddy's secretary.
Hello, Mr. Stocker. Thanks for returning my call.
Sorry I couldn't get back to you sooner, Mr. Mason, but the case is a bit complicated. Do you have a few minutes to talk about it right now?
There's that I want to be helpful tone and phrasing, even though he's going to have to give Mason bad news.
Well, we've taken it beyond counsel, right up to the chief himself to see what we can figure out for you. But I'm afraid there's just no doubt you're in violation of one of the key regulations. The reference number is 461A, if you want to take that down for your accountant. That's 461A.
And this time, bless him, no technogab, no inside jargon. He has given his facts in the language of the caller.
Now, is this all clear, Mr. Mason? I know it's complicated. Good. And I'm glad you understand why we had to reach this conclusion. We'll have the forms in the mail to you tonight.
Before he hangs up, Stocker has made sure the caller has a clear understanding and that it's mutual.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Goodbye. Jean, put a 3273 with a 526A amendment in the mail to Mr. Mason so he'll have it in the morning.
Inside jargon? Yes, but okay with insiders. And another chain of good impressions has been started on its way. And Stocker is making himself a better candidate for a move up in grade.
Now let's review some things we all know but tend to forget. Ready, Gail?
Ready.
The actual handling of the telephone instrument, for one thing. Hold it not this way, and not filtering our voice through our fingers, but by the middle, with the transmitter directly in front of the mouth.
And half an inch to an inch away.
Speak clearly, of course, without twisting the head away from the transmitter.
And not too fast.
Incidentally, let's make sure we get the caller's name right. even if we have to ask him to repeat it or spell it.
J. Willoughby McLaughlin.
If the caller wishes to leave a message, we should take care to be complete. Get the caller's name, of course. His department or other identification. Phone number, which we double-check.
Now that's 555-4476. Fine.
The subject, if needed. And whether we're to call him or he'll call us, and when.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Goodbye.
When calling out, unless the number is an old familiar one, we can avoid dialing errors and save time by keeping the number in sight while we dial. And incidentally, do you notice where the dial is paused? Always pull the dial all the way to the stop. Otherwise, we can think we've dialed an 8, but get a short pull 7.
Hello, Mrs. Macon. This is Mr. Graham's secretary returning your call.
Now, let's look at the problems of the second call. Often when we're talking on one call, another call comes in on top of it. Here, Gail excuses herself nicely and puts the line 1 call on hold.
Will you excuse me just a moment, Mrs. Meekin? I have another call coming in.
Notice Gail doesn't give any feeling of hurry to the caller.
Audit section, Mr. Graham's office. Miss Swanson speaking. Oh, yes, surely. Just a moment, please. Oh, that case is on Mr. Bingham's docket. I'll see if he's in.
This one sounds as though it might be a quickie, so Gail uses the hold button and disposes of it before going back to the first call.
May I speak to Mr. Bingham, please?
So now, as often happens, Gail now has her own 2 calls on hold and a possible third by someone at another desk. If Gail didn't have her procedures well thought out, she would now have the makings of a situation known as button, button, which line was my held call? Gail, show us what could happen.
Are you the party who was talking? Oh, I'm sorry.
There would go the line 3 call, whoever it was, on cutoff.
Are you Miss... I'm sorry. Hello, Mrs. Meekin?
Now she has cut off the line 2 call. But as I said, Gail was smart. Back when she answered her second call, she had penciled a little note to herself. So?
Hello, Mrs. Meekin? I'm sorry I had to leave you. I had another call.
Thanks, Gail. All these bits of professional techniques help start those chains of government people are helpful, good impressions. And there's a particular spot within the government where we can help each other. Mr. Pat Gorman is trying to make an important long-distance call. But first, all his office lines were busy. And when one of them cleared, all the FTS circuits were in use.
And you know what I think they're in use with sometimes?
All right, Mr. Gorman, there's an FTS line open now. Your secretary is dialing.
Hello, Frank. Pat. Yeah, I'm sorry to hold you up. I've been trying to get on FTS for an hour, but you know how it is. People get on the phone when the call isn't going against their budget, and they gab along like a bunch of old ladies with their recipes and funny stories. Drive you nuts. Oh, say, Frank, speaking of stories, have you heard the new one about the 2 traveling salesmen that are out right now?
And so on, gabbing like a bunch of old ladies. While the rest of us steam and stew because all the lines are tied up. Now, let's review a few essentials. For one, people who regularly work together on the phone as a boss and his secretary should work out a plan of just how calls and messages are to be handled. Such as, with what identifying phrase will she answer the phone?
Account section, Mr. Stalker's office, Miss Venner.
And how will she announce callers?
Mr. Stalker, it's Mr. Levine about the Mason case.
Good, put him on.
How will he take over the calls she places for him?
Mr. Mason is coming on, sir.
Thanks, I've got it. Hello, Mr. Mason. I've just reviewed the case with our legal section and,
When he's out of the office, what?
Gene, I'll be with Bill Horton at SBA. If Mr. Mason calls back, give him Horton's number. Back around 11:30.
Yes, sir.
When a call from a customer must be referred to somewhere else, and we can't give the reference immediately and with certainty that it's right, let's take the customer's name and number, and go through the search and transfer routine ourselves instead of sticking the caller with it. We're a lot better able to do it than the caller is.
Have the right person call you back.
There it is again, the extra step. The extra bit of help we don't have to give, but we do it because we're all human beings. That's what makes the difference between just doing the job and providing real service to the public. After all, this is the business the government is in, the service business, helping people. And there's no more important business than that. And of course, it's more economical, too. Doing the job right in the first place means that someone won't have to do the same job again when that angry customer comes back in.
And I'll stay around till your man comes for the papers, yeah. No trouble at all. Glad we're able to be helpful.
Our efforts to be helpful, to go that extra step, will return to all of us in government in the form of dividends, in better attitudes of the public toward government, in public acceptance of us personally as competent professionals, in the increased regard our neighbors and community associates have for us, and best of all, in the deep inner satisfaction of doing a good job well, and in the opportunity and the privilege of helping people who want and need our help.